We need to have answers, and that are scripturally, spiritually valid answers, so that we can stand on a foundation without apology to an Almighty God and say, God, I want to hold your hand and walk into the future.
To be a healer requires a willingness, an assumption, if you will, on the public's part, but a willingness on our part to be ethical in every single dimension of our practice, of our service.
Goodness is a generational phenomenon. Remember what God said to the Jews? If you keep this law, it will go well with you and your children.
From my own perspective, as somebody whose faith is very important to him, I have worried that we have not engaged the religious community in some of the serious ethical issues that are posed by the advances in this field, at least not to the degree that we need to.
Hello, you can see the title, you can see all of the relevant information. At the bottom there's a URL if you want to go look at our laboratory site. The director of our laboratory is Professor Kawamura, who's Japanese. So the site is Shogun. Okay, go ahead and go to the next slide. Okay. The purpose of this talk, I won't try to lie to you, convince you that I'm the most brilliant person ever to live, to keep you from finding out the truth, and to have fun. Here's a few of the robots that we'll be seeing. Actually, not the upper right one. The top two robots are from our laboratory, Isaac and Helpmate. And the bottom two robots are other ones. The bottom right is COG from MIT, and we'll be seeing a little video about COG. And the bottom left is Aibo, which is a commercially available entertainment robot from Sony. And this picture, interestingly, actually came from, not from Sony's website, but from the website of someone who is an owner of an Aibo. And you can see Aibo playing with his cat. Go to the next one, please. And I assume that there might be one or two other geeks out there besides me, so I thought I'd put a slide of gibberish up there. Isaac is a upper body humanoid, has two 6-degree of freedom arms. The arms are unusual. They're powered by air, and that makes them soft. If you push on them, they give about like a human arm does, which makes them safe, by the way. He uses up to 5 networked Pentium 3 computers. In fact, there's one computer assigned to each camera. Stereo vision, and if you're a real software geek, we have Visual C++ and Microsoft COM, DCOM technology, agent-based system, and a bunch of other stuff. And then the thing on the bottom, we have anthropomorphic end effectors, which are commonly called hands. Go to the next one. If that bothered you or you weren't sure of everything, then I have this warning. We've declared the rest of the presentation to be a jargon-free zone. Okay. First, let's talk about what artificial life is and what artificial intelligence is. Now, I'm a roboticist, which means that I'm one of the major end users of artificial intelligence and, to a smaller degree, artificial life research. I don't do pure research in either of those fields, but know a fair amount about both of them. This is from an article that's on the web from New Scientist about artificial intelligence, or AI, and artificial life, or A-life. And as you can see, basically in both cases, we're trying to mimic or to copy, make use of ideas from biology. And we may start with low-level genetic type information, genetic inheritance and evolution, evolution in the broadest sense of just adaptation over time, and or we may be shooting absolutely for some aspect of human-level intelligence. Next one. What is artificial life? Artificial life is a relatively new term, a relatively new field, but it focuses on biology in the widest sense. And in most cases, what they do is they have a population of virtual creatures, little simple models of creatures living in some virtual world. And they study the interactions and the orderly behavior that emerges from the interactions between these creatures. Now, in robotics, the way that this has come to show up is robots that actually work together in some kind of teaming behavior. But we also are looking at machines that can evolve, and virtual creatures or populations of creatures, essentially, where the individuals learn, age, reproduce, and die. Artificial intelligence is older. I won't say much older. It began probably in World War II. The foundations of it go back to the attempts to crack the German codes. So in traditional AI, you're actually trying to capture human-level intelligence in a machine. So you're trying to capture the decision-making capabilities to make complex, difficult decisions. And it's typified in its traditional approach by the machine Deep Blue that IBM created that beat the chess champion Garry Kasparov. Now this is a little bit of local news footage. Go ahead and start it. I'm going to show you our robots
Wilkes at
first.
Vanderbilt's Intelligent Robotics Lab says Isaac can do much more than just press the flesh.
Well, the purpose of a humanoid shape is to have a robot that can interact closely with human beings.
But don't expect Isaac to do your homework or clean your house. He's a far cry from the robots you see in the movies.
Oh, robot! Disable pulse blaster!
Command accepted.
For now, they are nothing more than fantasy. Isaac is reality.
Why is he looking at me? He looks for the biggest skin tone blob he can find.
Isaac is one of perhaps a dozen humanoid-type robots in the world. He's programmed to
The breaks in the videos are a bit crude. I did them myself mostly. So. Go to the next one. Okay, and start that one up. This is typical of what we might show at a conference. In fact, it was shown at a conference. And I'll try to explain what's going on.
Isaac, this is the red one.
What we're doing here is we're trying to teach Isaac how to learn the position of an object based on a gesture from the user.
Here we see the view through one of Isaac's cameras.
So Isaac is actually finding it, learning the position, and storing this information in a short-term memory structure we call a sensory egosphere. And now the robot will be able to recall the positions from memory rather than having to go find them all over again. Okay. This one is in Japan.
登りますね。やっぱり外にこうやって出て歩いてるのを見るとびっくりしますよね、これね。人が入ってるみたいに滑らかですもんね。
That really is a robot. That's not a guy in a suit.
これはプログラムされれば。
これはもうプログラミングすればこれができるってことですね。
そうですね。ただプログラミングっつってもまあいろんなレベルがありましてね。これは相当自律型のプログラミングというかね。
これ今手は振ってませんけど手も振るようにはできるわけですよねということはね。
はい、要するに手を振ると同じようなバランスの取り方をちゃんと体の中でいろいろやってるわけですね。その体全体を動かしながら。
And you can have one yourself for a little under $1 million. That was actually a secret project inside Honda for years. And when they released it to the public and showed it, it absolutely floored the robotics community. Also in Japan is Waseda University, which is also probably, well, it's one of the most sophisticated robotics laboratories in the world. Go ahead and start this one.
Since 1992, 早稲田大学が 高齢者や病人の介護などに必要な要素技術の確立を目指して1992年から研究開発に取り組んだのがワビアンとアタリー2号という2台のロボットです。
The English is coming out the other speaker.
And was specifically developed to walk on 2 feet. This bipedal evolution is vital if robots are to adapt to common features of human environments.
The robot's
like
actually dancing, by the way. That's not his walking gait.
20 years ago, it took 40.
Okay. That's Dr. Hashimoto, who's the head of the Humanoid Project in Waseda. This one, coming back to the United States, this is a simulation because the robot's not complete yet, but of a robot envisioned by NASA at Johnson Space Center, and it's called Robonaut, and the idea is for this robot to do a lot of exterior work on the maintenance work on the International Space Station. Now what you'll see it do, it will attach itself, it has one leg, to the exterior, and it will set up a platform which will later be used by an astronaut. So the idea is to try to minimize the amount of time that an astronaut has to spend outside. And here comes the astronaut. Okay. Now what you're seeing here, now the upper body of Robonaut, first prototype, is built. What you're seeing here is the hand. It has a remarkably dexterous hand that's very human-like. And again, that's a robot. That's not a glove with hands in it. Now, what they lack at this point is actually intelligent control devices that can take advantage of the dexterity. What they're doing is teleoperation, and here you can see a person on the right with, that's a person's hand in a data glove, and the information that's being measured from the hand is being transferred to the robot hand. And this last demonstration shows that you can screw a nut onto a bolt, which is quite a difficult dexterous operation for a robot hand. Now, the reason this is fairly significant for NASA is that an astronaut has to wear these immense gloves when he goes outside, so that the dexterity of the astronaut is greatly compromised. Yet a robot doesn't have to wear the gloves, and so we can have a hand roughly shaped and sized like a human hand. Go to the next one. This one is from Japan. I don't remember the laboratory that produced this one. I believe it's called Mr. Helper. And it's an example of using the robot to manage something heavy, and the communication between the human and robot comes from the human pushing on the object and the robot feeling the force and moving it in the direction you want to move it. So go ahead and run that.
And the robot, we designed an impedance-based control system. An impedance controller for each manipulator was designed so that the object manipulated by both arms has a specified impedance around a specified compliance center. The mobile base is damping controlled so that it has a specified damping characteristics around the center of the mobile base. The resultant passive dynamics guarantees the stability of the resultant system. We realized two types of cooperative object manipulations. In this picture, the robot helper supports the weight of the object.
They're using an impedance controller, which is a relatively new idea, and it allows for a soft type of control. Without the impedance control, you get an unstable situation when you try to push the object down, it hits the table, and then the robot keeps bouncing it on the table, trying to shove it all the way through the table, which usually isn't the idea that we're trying to do. Now this is COG, this is MIT. Now I'd like to take a few minutes to describe COG. COG is a remarkable robot from a variety of points of view. The intent of COG is to take simple behaviors and take the ideas of what we call behavior-based robotics, which are that you can build up complex behaviors by interactions of simple behaviors. The idea here is to try to take simple behaviors that are designed to mimic what people believe to be, by theories, the early infant type behaviors, and then to see if you can teach the robot COG to do certain ordinary things such as reach out and grasp. So this has a fairly naturalistic basis in the philosophy behind it. Now the idea here in this presentation is that COG is able to move its arms, but it doesn't know how to move its arms to reach to an object that it's looking at. Much like a baby kind of flailing its arms around doesn't have very good motor control. And so what's happening here is they haven't programmed into COG the ability to reach where it's looking, which is something that we can definitely do. But rather they've programmed into COG some simple learning techniques that enable it to judge that it did or did not reach successfully in the direction that it's looking. And then after a very long time, in this case 3 hours, the robot begins to learn to control its muscles through its own learning process. So it's not a very exciting video, but having said all that, you begin to realize the significance that it is somehow learned to reach the correct point. Now this robot is Kismet, and we're going to have to do something inelegant here. We're going to have to shut down PowerPoint. This escape is, there you go. Now I want you to listen to the robot's creator. Her name is Cynthia Breeziel. I want you to listen to how she describes the robot. And I want you to watch the robot.
I'm interested in learning in a social context where it's the interaction I try to exploit is something like an infant caretaker interaction, where I'm the caretaker essentially and the robot is like an infant. And I want to exploit these kinds of interactions that parents have always been giving their children in terms of constraining the environment, making the environment suitable for learning, helping the infant learn over time. And the motivations play a critical role in that as far as the infant telling the mother, am I being overwhelmed? Am I being bored? How should you be interacting with me to optimize my learning ability? And me, being the caretaker, being very receptive to reading these emotional cues and responding to them in the way I interact with the robot to promote its learning. This is Kismet. Kismet's my infant robot. It gives me facial expressions, which tells me what its motivational state is. This first one is anger, extreme anger. Disgust, excitement, fear, this is happiness, this one is interest, this one is sadness, surprise, this one is tired, and this one is sleep.
In a suitable learning environment, Kismet's drives are in.
Okay. Well, that's, she's talking about it, about human caretaker-infant interaction. Okay, go ahead and start back up. Kismet looks remarkably like a Furby, don't you think? Now this robot is not at the level of humanoid type appearance, but it's a very interesting robot from the University of Minnesota. So click on the upper left one. It actually can change its configuration.
This is the first instance of a robot system reconfiguring to use two topologically different modes of locomotion.
Looks like a caterpillar, doesn't it?
One advantage of these systems is that they are very versatile.
Now in the lower right, we see it in a kind of bizarre three-legged walking motion, which they don't stay on very long, so I assume it doesn't work very well. But we'll go ahead and click the right one there. We'll see a little bit more of the caterpillar behavior.
Rubble pile. Here, a pile of debris has been dragged into the lab as a test environment. Crawling through pipes or rubble would be useful in searching for victims in an earthquake-damaged building. Once a victim is found, the system may be reconfigured into some sort of supporting structure. This research is partially funded by DARPA, a U.S. defense agency. Here, U.S. Marines have set up a test obstacle course for this early prototype of polybot. The system successfully navigated through most of these obstacles.
I should also point out that the research in our lab is partially funded by DARPA as well. That's a fascinating robot. Now this robot here, go back to Japan, is called Roller Walker. I believe that this is from the University of Tokyo, and that the professor in charge is Professor Hirose, who happens to be one of the giants of the robot field. This robot walks on 4 legs, but it can also, on a smooth surface, it can convert the feet into wheels, and it can skate. And this was actually quite a hit at a recent conference. So go ahead and roll this one. It's a little bit funny, actually.
Roller walker makes normal walking motion. Smooth terrain, it transforms into its skating mode. The propulsion is the same as roller skating.
Remote gaze control of a cat.
If you've ever tried to write even a simple program, you might imagine how difficult it is to program a robot to skate. Another Japanese laboratory, Japanese just love robots apparently, is ETL, which is the Electrotechnical Laboratory. It's a government lab. Very, very sophisticated work there. These robots we're about to see are small. They're about the size of a toaster. But they're doing some fascinating interaction work between robots, so roll this one.
Our experimental system consists of a mobile robot equipped with independently rotating binocular cameras and 2 arms, a high-performance image processor, and a controlling computer. This is an example of posing behavior. The binocular robot continuously orients itself towards a particular mate among various relevant objects and maintains a constant distance from it. We've been able to give the robot the visual function for discriminating a particular target from others using an extended zero disparity filter method.
Start the next one.
One robot is pushing a large item. Ahead of it, there is a yellow obstacle. In its current trajectory, the robot will hit the obstacle. The other binocular robot first carefully observes this situation, then predicts the collision, and swiftly approaches the object to remove it and let the mate pass.
So tragedy has been averted, as we can see. Now this is, again, the Sony Aibo. The top 3 photos are from the Sony website itself. And the bottom 2 are from a user that owns an Aibo. And on the left, you can see the Aibo playing with a little ball, and on the right, playing with the owner's cat. Go to the next one. This is a home movie from the owner. It's highly compressed, so the quality isn't very good, but we'll see Aibo play with a ball here. So I don't know if you can see it pat the ball there at the end. You know, is there anybody out there that thought that any of those machines seemed a little lifelike in some sense? A few people did. Well, that's kind of how we tend to react. We project life onto anything that moves, pretty much. Next slide. Now, I'm going to go backwards. I'm going to start at the highest levels of sophistication and move backwards, which is kind of an interesting order. But most people, when they start talking about artificial intelligence, leap right to Lieutenant Commander data and ethical concerns there. So how far can we go, and can we make an artificial human? Now, before I try to answer that one, I'm going to go to the next slide, take a very short diversion, which I think will make sense in a minute. Start with the statement that human beings have minds and they have brains. And this is generally not considered a controversial statement. And there are at least 2 positions in the scientific community. The dominant position is the naturalistic position, which would argue that we can explain everything in terms of natural processes. And so the mind can be explained solely in terms of natural processes, and the ramification then is that the mind and the brain are the same thing. The dualist position, or a Cartesian dualist position, and that's using the term extremely broadly, I think, from how the philosophers would normally use it, basically would hold that the mind is distinct from the brain, and thus there is an immaterial part to man. Next slide. Now, Sir John Eccles was a Nobel Prize-winning neuroscientist, died recently. He argued that we could not achieve mind through the current artificial intelligence approaches. And if I could go on for hours talking about why you couldn't, but he has a book, I can't remember if he co-authored it with Karl Popper or not, but it's How the Self Controls Its Brain, available through Springer. I tend to agree, and I've been heavily influenced by John Eccles, so I tend to agree that we can't achieve mind as we conventionally think of it. But, and even if we could, we're a very, very long way from achieving anything like a human mind, even though some of these things seemed rather sophisticated. However, we may not be so far away from achieving machines that have a level of lifelikeness or sophistication that is similar to lower life forms. So what about a lower life form? Have we or will we ever make an artificial life form? Which immediately brings up the question, what is life? Or what's a life form? Or perhaps more pragmatically, how would I know that it was alive? And I don't know. This is a question I'm just posing. From World Book Encyclopedia, which is, of course, aimed at a fairly young audience, nevertheless does a nice job of distilling things down to a simple presentation. I took a few statements. Again, life is one of the great mysteries of the universe, and we just don't have a definition for it. And then the next one, which is the obvious point, we just know whether something's alive. A rabbit is alive, but a rock isn't. Next one. And again, from World Book, we identify living things by how they differ from non-living things. They grow, they reproduce, they eat. I added the last one, they move. But after centuries of deep consideration, again from World Book, we don't know what life is. Well, I don't know how to answer that question, so I'll throw that out to you. Throw the questions out and then run later. But suppose somehow we came to a consensus that we had made something that was alive. We convinced ourselves it was alive. Then that brings up a couple of other questions. Does it have any kind of rights? What are the ethical responsibilities to this creature? And should it have legal protection under the law? Again, I don't know the answer to that. If we look at the biological life forms and how we've dealt with them, we see a few things. Now, these are a very, very simplistic breakdown with my opinions as to how much rights those things have. Microscopic life forms don't seem to have very much in the way of rights because we have an entire branch of medicine devoted to killing them. And invertebrates don't seem to have a great deal of rights because we hire exterminators to kill ants and roaches and termites. Vertebrates have some rights. For example, if somebody had a bird and they were doing ghastly things to it and treating it very badly, no doubt some of us would feel, I think, justifiably upset at how they were treating that bird. Similarly, if they were doing the same types of horrible things to a cat or a dog, probably even more of us would be upset about it. And if they were doing it to a child, we would pretty much all be absolutely horrified. Okay. So what features in a creature seem to cause it to have greater or lesser rights? Well, from the musings of the previous slide, we see that for some reason there's a distinction that seems to occur somewhere around the invertebrate versus vertebrate boundary. Although notice that's a biological distinction. It's whether or not you have a spinal cord. Whether you're mammal versus non-mammal, again, another biological distinction. The third one, does it appear to have a mind? And that's not a biological distinction per se. And lastly, how much do I see myself? How much does it look like me? We may tend to see ourselves in our pets. So next question, again an open question, does the way we've dealt with life form rights for biological creatures apply to artificial or cybernetic life forms? Now, this last slide seems to come from out of nowhere, but I want to leave you with an interesting thought. We are currently surrounded by intelligent machines. You're probably not very aware of that. The automatic teller machines are quite sophisticated. The new cars are very sophisticated with automatic braking systems and self-diagnosis capabilities. New generations of appliances are being made that basically diagnose their own wear and tear. Conceivably, they could call the repairman before they broke. Last one there, virtually all of the internet search engines, if you use Yahoo or InfoSeek or whatever, virtually all of those are intelligent in some sense. And they came out of artificial intelligence research. So that's the end of the presentation, but I just want you to be aware that it's not completely abstract. You're surrounded by intelligent machines. The question is, are possibly any of them alive?